Making your own seed starting mixes is simple, it can be budget friendly, and it allows you to use the ingredients that you want to use. Hey friends, thanks for joining me today as I mix up some seed starting soil mix. This year, I'm taking a bit of a different approach and I'm going to trial a few different blends or mixes of ingredients to try to come up with the most simplified seed starting medium that I can that still has great results. Ideally, we're going to get away from as much imported material as possible. If we can grow seedlings in something as simple as worm castings, then life will be just infinitely simpler and your seed starting mix will have a lower environmental impact. You can, of course, buy seed starting mixes from any store, especially as we get closer to springtime. Stores are going to start to carry it. But a lot of those, A, are pricey, and B, may have ingredients that you don't want in your seed starting mix. For example, peat moss. If you want to make your own seed starting mix to avoid the use of something like peat, it's a great economical option. There are, of course, some companies out there now starting to create seed starting blends that don't have peat, but they tend to be a little pricier. The demand just isn't there as much yet. If you mix your own, then you end up with bulk materials you can use all season long. And my goal this year is just to reduce the environmental impact of my seed starting mix, which means reducing and simplifying the inputs or the ingredients in that. So seed starting mixes have historically contained peat moss. Peat moss has negative environmental impacts associated with it. The harvesting of the peat, first of all, is not sustainable from a resource management perspective. It can take 1,000 years or more for peat bogs to decompose and build up the amount of peat moss that is ready to be harvested by the horticultural industry. So not sustainable by any stretch of the mind, barely renewable. But it also has really staggering environmental impacts when these peat bogs are harvested for gardeners to use. That harvesting process releases 5% of the carbon emissions equivalent of all human-caused carbon emissions on this planet. 5%. That's a huge proportion. And so I think gardeners everywhere are starting to catch on to this. We're starting to understand the environmental detriment of harvesting peat. But the horticultural industry still sees dollar signs and it's still selling, and so they still harvest and sell it. There are some alternatives out there right now, like cocoa coir. Here's a brick of cocoa coir. Cocoa coir is the waste byproduct of coconut husks. And so it's produced in places where coconuts grow. I know Sri Lanka is a pretty common place for cocoa coir to be produced. And it sounds great on the surface. I mean, it is reusing a waste byproduct, but there's some controversial issues with cocoa coir as well. Not as bad, I don't think, as peat, but there's a lot of water that gets used to wash the coconut husks. Often that's seawater, in which case your cocoa coir is going to be salty, which is not good for your plants. And if they use fresh water, then they are taking away valuable fresh water from people in countries that have very limited fresh water. And then there's also the shipping factor. Cocoa coir comes from far away. For me, I live in Canada. There's no way we would ever produce cocoa coir anywhere near here. And so there's a large carbon footprint from that perspective. But I'm going to see if I can get away from peat moss and cocoa coir this year. I'm going to try this product in my seed starting mix. I have used it in the garden before and loved it. In fact, I did a trial growing sweet potatoes with this stuff mixed into it, and I'll link that video. This is called Soil Renewal. It's a product by one of my friends who is a sheep farmer, fairly local to me. She's a regenerative farmer, and so I love supporting her farm. It's called Bushbeck Farms, and she sells her lamb at Evergreen Brickworks. So if you're in the Toronto area, you can check them out. They also sell this stuff now. And this is also a waste byproduct from the wool industry. So the wool that is too dirty, not fit for being used in fibers, can be turned into these pellets, which are great for the garden. It regulates soil moisture. So if you've ever worked with wool or held wool, you know that it absorbs. That's exactly what you want from something like a cocoa coir or a peat moss. But we're going to get it in our sheep wool pellet. This cat is not allowed on the counters or the tables. And every time I have the camera out to them, Anyway, this is, of course, there's no chemicals in this. It's not synthetic in any way, shape, or form. It's just wool. It's spent wool that can't be used in fiber industry. It encourages beneficial microbial growth in the soil, and it's climate friendly. All right, here's my buffet of ingredients that I'm working with this year. First, we've got coco coir. This is a replacement for peat moss, and I'm about to soak it in some water so that it's going to become light and fluffy, and I'll show you that. And then paired with that, we've got the sheep wool pellets. This will be in a different trial mix instead of the coco coir. We also have perlite. Perlite is volcanic glass that's heated under extreme heat and then it explodes. It pops like popcorn, and so it's extremely light and airy and fluffy. And the use of perlite in soil mixes is to aerate that soil. So it prevents soil from becoming compacted. And if you're working with something like compost, as you water in compost or worm castings, it can condense a little bit and get kind of thick and gummy and muddy. And so adding perlite is a good way to keep that compost nice and fluffy. Also, we have vermiculite. This is really messy. I don't necessarily want to take it out. I got it in a cardboard box for some reason. Vermiculite is also mined, as is perlite. It is a mineral. I can't remember the constituents, but it's got like, I don't know, iron, magnesium, something like that. And it is also heated to the point where it puffs up a little bit, and it does hold on to a lot of moisture and also nutrients, and it releases some of those minerals in your soil. Vermiculite is excellent for scattering on the top of your seed starting mix. It keeps the moisture sort of locked in. And when you're germinating seeds, that's really important. You want the moisture locked in at the surface of the soil so that that seed has enough moisture to germinate before the roots start digging down deeper to get at more moisture down below. So I always use vermiculite in my seed starting mixes. This year I'm going to try one recipe without any at all, but this one is a good one for retaining moisture and sort of slowly releasing that moisture and nutrients as needed. And it can aerate your soil a little bit, just like perlite does. What else do we have? Oh, and then worm castings. So the benefits of using worm castings over compost, I mean, it's negligible. You can use either, but worm castings are 100% broken down. Like all of the organic matter has passed through the digestive tract of the worm. Whereas compost, you're relying on, yes, sometimes worms, but also just other microbes to break down that organic matter. And sometimes you'll still have chunks of less broken down organic matter in your compost. And so unless you get it from a really reputable source and you sift it, worm castings is like easier, ready to go. You just scoop it out and use it, and you know that it's perfectly finished, decomposed organic material. Worm castings also technically have more beneficial bacteria and enzymes in it than regular compost, something about the worms producing that. But again, it's negligible. You can use either worm castings or a nice, clean, sifted compost. All right, so before we can get started doing our recipes and mixing things together, we need to hydrate the coco coir. I'm just going to put it in. I'm going to use it all. This is going to be way too much. In fact, I'm a little bit worried I'm going to overfill this. And now I'm going to fill this with water. Now we're going to watch as it slowly expands. I don't need a whole lot in each mix because I'm only doing 6 little seed cells of each. It's not a proper trial. I mean, I can't do any significance testing with that. And FYI, I am a researcher and an evaluator professionally, and so I could do significance testing on this if I wanted to, but I don't have the space to do a huge trial like that. I'm not a commercial growing operation. So I really only need to grow, I think 15 pepper plants. I'm going to double that because I'm going to give some away. And then for the sake of trialing this, that means I'm going to do 4 6-packs of peppers, with each of those 6-packs being a different recipe, but the same variety of peppers in each. 1. So this first recipe is 4 parts cocoa coir, 1 part vermiculite, 1 part perlite, and 1 part worm casting. I'm going to fill one of these little 6-cell packs. One of the things that I don't love about using cocoa coir is that it's quite hairy, all the little coconut strands or fibers. Fibrous, that's the word. And I find them annoying in the mix. Like it just looks like it's full of cat hair or something. I don't think it really gets in the way of the seeds coming up, but still. All right, I'm going to sow the seeds in it later, but I'm going to set that one aside. And now I'm going to package this up into some sort of container and label it. Right, recipe number 2 is going to be 2 parts worm castings or compost, 1 part perlite, making less this time, and 1 part sheep wool pellets. I'm not using vermiculite this time because the sheep wool pellets are going to give me the same effect because they not only hold on to moisture, but they hold on to nutrients, so they release nutrients into your soil slowly. Now, when the sheep wool pellets absorb water, they're going to expand and become bigger. So they will end up taking up more like the mass of the cocoa coir once they've expanded in water. The third mix is going to be 2 parts worm castings and 1 part perlite. Now there's nothing in this mix to retain moisture except for the worm castings. Compost can retain some moisture. And the 4th recipe is just worm castings. Now, theoretically, to start all of your seeds in just worm castings, if you are someone who starts a lot of seeds, it would not really be that economically feasible because worm castings can be expensive and producing them can take a lot. But if you can use just any compost, just start seeds in compost. That would be definitely a money saver. Okay, it's time to start sowing some seeds, but first I need to mark out which ones are going in these. I've already labeled which recipe they are, recipe 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I'm going to be sowing more peppers today than what I'm putting in here, but I'm going to do all of my sweet peppers on repeat in each of these. Here's my list. I'm going to look to my plant list and I need, so for sweet peppers, I'm going to do a habanada, Twingo, Costco banana peppers. Took seeds from one of those a few years ago and they've been amazing performers. King of the North, Jalapeno, and Chinese Giant. That's 6. Okay, so those are the 6 sweet peppers that I want to grow this year. I'm going to do them in each of the seed starting mixes. And then my hot peppers, I'll just start maybe in one of these, whichever one I think will perform the best. One thing that I like to use for labels is old recycled Venetian blinds or whatever kind of blinds. And I was able to find somebody throwing out their plastic blinds before it gets to the dump. I might as well make use of them. So I cut them up into these little tabs and they're perfect size to put in here. People will use popsicle sticks to avoid plastic, but in my experience, popsicle sticks do mold. They start to rot, mold grows on them. And so metal is ideal. Plastic is second best. So I use these old second-hand plastic blinds. All right, my labels are all written. Now it's time to get planting.
All right, I'm going to say a little bit more about how I started these seeds and how this is a trial. So ideally, I would have probably an entire 10-20 tray. That's the full tray I put these seed packs on for each soil blend. And then I would do the same exact pepper or the same exact variety of vegetable in all of it. So I would end up with 4 large trays of all the same thing, but with different soil mixes. That might give me enough numbers to actually play around, like statistically, what works best. This is also about being practical. These are the peppers that I need to start for my garden, and I want to make sure that I have what I need. I don't want to be burdened with a whole bunch of extra trays worth of vegetables that I'm going to have to make room for under my grow lights. Sure, I could sell them or give them away, but it's just way too much hassle. So I'm balancing my desire to do a trial and actually figure out which of these seed starting mediums is going to be effective or most effective. I'm balancing that with also just my practical need to start pepper seeds right now. So it's just a mini trial. It's just for fun. You can follow along and see how these things grow, but you might want to wait until I report back on how well things have done before you start seeds in any of these mixes at home. Now, mix number 1, which is coco coir, perlite, vermiculite, and worm castings. That one's a safe bet. I've started seeds in that before. And once again, the ratio for that was 4 parts coco coir, 1 part perlite, 1 part vermiculite, and 1 part worm castings. And so it's nice, light, and fluffy. You got lots of that fluffy coco coir to absorb water, and then you've got plenty of perlite and vermiculite to create air channels and to retain moisture and release nutrients. And then just enough worm castings to help support those seedlings as they start to get bigger and they use up what little nutrients is in their seed. Also, I think that based on how this goes, so over the next month as these pepper plants grow, I'm going to narrow down this experiment a little bit and maybe pick 2 of the best performing mixes and do the same thing over again with my tomatoes in March. All right, now I'm going to get these peppers over onto my seed starting shelves and I'm going to give them a bottom water. I'm going to put them on a heat mat and cover them with a humidity dome. And we'll check back in a few days to see what's germinating.
Okay, I am literally trying to film a video showing the update of my seedlings, and my cat is eating them. She's eating them. No. Okay, I need to go to a different place. Okay, I am reporting in 10 days after sowing my pepper seeds in the trial soils. And so far, I can see that some of these soils seem to give the seeds a harder time than others. This right here, my cat just ate the top off that pepper. Discount that. That's not the soil's fault. Ugh. Okay, this is seed mix 1. This was coco coir, worm castings, perlite, and vermiculite. This is the gold standard that I would normally use. And we had 4 germinated 10 days in. I see a 5th that's trying to germinate, and then nothing in the 6th cell yet. And then we've got over here trial 3. This one has slightly ahead, not much different. This was just worm castings and perlite, I think. And so in this one, worm castings and perlite, we have 5 of 6 that are fully germinated. This one is, that one's small, but it's coming. So I would say 1 and 3 are pretty much on par. They're pretty much equal at this point. This one is 2. This is with the sheep wool. Now, I recognized after I did it that I really should have soaked the pellets first, because if you soak them after or you just mix them into soil and then add water, they puff up, but they're not at all mixed yet. So there's just sort of chunks of sheep wool. I think that hindered germination a little bit. But I think I'm going to trial it again in just a potting mix. So first I'm going to soak it, and then I'm going to mix it in with everything, mix it in with some other ingredients, and try it as a soil mix for already germinated growing baby plants. Number 4 is back here. This was pure worm castings, and it just seems a little bit slower, surprisingly. There are 2 fully up. One is just starting. And then one back here, you can barely see.
Down there, there's a little speck coming up. That's it, germinated. I see here there's a seed laying on top of the soil. I hope that I didn't wash it out or something, and there's actually a seed missing from one of these cells. But like I said, this is not with any scientific rigor. This is just me needing to start seeds and wanting to try some different mixes. And then, of course, this back here is the same as mix one. It's just my hot peppers. I gave them their own, not part of the trial. Okay, so that's the 10-day update. We're going to check back in another 5 days maybe and see where we're at. We're now 15 days in after sowing these pepper seeds, and I wanted to do another update. I think I've come to the realization that some of the germination that failed was because of the seed. So I've got this Chinese giant pepper, and none of those seeds germinated in any of the trial mixes. So that's the seed's fault. We're going to discount that. So we're looking at a score out of 5 on whether things germinate or not. And in seed mix 1, we have a 5 out of 5. In fact, they're doing well. They've got their first set of true leaves. That's the one that my cat ripped, but it doesn't count. It was 5 out of 5 for germination. In the mix 2 with the wool pellets, it was 4 out of 5, but again, I'm not blaming the wool pellets. I didn't soak them first. I think I would soak them next time. And of course, there's always a chance that it was just a seed that had lower germination rates. They're a couple years old at this point, so we can't blame the seed starting mix. Mix 3, we've got 5 out of 5. It's pretty much on par with mix 1. The interesting thing is, soil mix 3 had no cocoa coir. The only thing that it didn't have was cocoa coir and vermiculite, actually. So this one seems like a really good contender. It's a way of getting away from cocoa coir while maintaining excellent germination. And then finally, soil mix 4 has 4 out of 5, so not terrible. Again, it was the habanada in both the wool mix and just the worm castings that didn't germinate. There's always a chance the habanada seeds were older, they had poorer germination rates, so I can't blame the mix for that. I'm definitely going to try all of these again when I do my tomatoes. I wish I'd done it with my brassicas, but I didn't think to. All in all, at this point, I can recommend that just worm castings or compost and perlite is just as effective as the typical mix of having like a peat or a cocoa coir. Oh, I just knocked over seedlings. And worm castings, perlite, and vermiculite. I mean, it's the basic 4 ingredients that you'd find in most seed starting mixes. So, I mean, it's a gold standard, but apparently you don't even need that cocoa coir or peat because this one is absolutely no different. I wonder what seedlings I just killed. I hope you enjoyed watching as we made these different soil mixes, and I hope that you'll follow along to see how they do. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more food growing content. And also please, in the comments, tell me what kind of soil mixes you grow in. Are you growing in homemade mixes? Do you buy a specific brand that you like in bags? I'd love to know what you're using. Regardless of what you're using to start your seeds in, I hope that you will come and grow with us.